wisdom,
prudentia,
justice,
justitia,
temperance,
temperantia,
courage.
fortitudo.
Applying ancient philosophy to modern life, this is the Sunday Stoic.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Sunday Stoic. Thanks to all the listeners and especially the patrons out there that support the show and everyone who writes in letting me know that you listen. It's good to hear from you. Makes it worthwhile to know that some of you are benefiting from my little podcast. There's a lot of Stoic podcasts out there now. It's good that I have my own little following and we meet up once a week, kind of like church service here to talk about Stoicism. Just in case you are unaware, Stoic Week is coming up, so sign up for that. I'm not part of it officially, but I'm going to participate. We can talk about it on the podcast if you want, but I'd like to sign up myself and do the weekly exercises or the daily exercises for a week and take part in that. It's something you can sign up for. I'll put some links in the show notes. Also, Stoicon, I believe, is coming up. I'd love to go to that, but it's in London. And I don't see myself traveling that far right now. When I was a senior in high school, I did go to Germany for a week, but that's the only time I've ever left the continent. I'd love to go someday, though. Today's reading is going to be a single reading, but a long reading. I thought I would read one of those very poignant letters from Seneca to Lucilius. So it's going to be his letter on the shortness of life. Now, don't confuse that with another work he has by the same name, On the Shortness of Life. That one is very much also worth a read, but that would be like at least an hour-long podcast if I were to read that whole thing. So I'm doing On the Shortness of Life from Letters from a Stoic, also known as Moral Letters to Lucilius. Letters from a Stoic, also known as Moral Letters to Lucilius, number 49, On the Shortness of Life. A man is indeed lazy and careless, my dear Lucilius, if he is reminded of a friend only by seeing some landscape which stirs the memory. And yet there are times when the old familiar haunts stir up a sense of loss that has been stored away in the soul, not bringing back dead memories, but rousing them from their dormant state, just as the sight of a lost friend's favorite slave, or his cloak, or his house, renews the mourner's grief, even though it has been softened by time. Now, lo and behold, Campania, and especially Naples, and your beloved Pompeii, struck me when I viewed them with a wonderfully fresh sense of longing for you. You stand in full view before my eyes. I am on the point of parting from you. I see you choking down your tears and resisting, without success, the emotions that well up at the very moment when you try to check them. I seem to have lost you but a moment ago. For what is not but a moment ago, when one begins to use the memory? It was but a moment ago that I sat as a lad in the school of the philosopher Sotion, but a moment ago that I began to plead in the courts, but a moment ago that I lost the desire to plead, but a moment ago that I lost the ability. Infinitely swift is the flight of time, as those who see more clearly who are looking backwards. For when we are intent on the present, we do not notice it, so gentle is the passage of time's headlong flight. Do you ask the reason for this? All past time is in the same place. It all presents the same aspect to us. It lies together. Everything slips into the same abyss. Besides, an event which in its entirety is of brief compass cannot contain long intervals. The time which we spend in living is but a point, nay, even less than a point. But this point of time, infinitesimal as it is, nature has mocked by making it seem outwardly of longer duration. She has taken one portion thereof and made it infancy, another childhood, another youth, another the gradual slope, so to speak, from youth to old age, and old age itself is still another. How many steps for how short a climb? It was but a moment ago that I saw you off on your journey, and yet this, quote, moment ago, unquote, makes up a goodly share of our existence, which is so brief. We should reflect that it will soon come to an end altogether. In other years, time did not seem to me to go so swiftly. Now it seems fast, beyond belief, perhaps because I feel the finish line is moving closer to me, or it may be that I have begun to take heed and reckon up my losses. For this reason, I am all the more angry, and some men claim the major portion of this time for superfluous things, time which, no matter how carefully it is guarded, cannot suffice even for necessary things. Cicero declared that if the number of his days were doubled, he should not have time to read the lyric poets. And you may rate the dialecticians in the same class, but they are foolish in a more melancholy way. The lyric poets are avowedly frivolous, but the dialecticians believe that they themselves are engaged upon serious business. I do not deny that one must cast a glance at dialect, but it ought to be a mere glance, a sort of greeting from the threshold, merely that one may not be deceived, or judge these pursuits to contain any hidden matters of great worth. Why do you torment yourself and lose weight over some problem which it is more clever to have scorned than to solve? When a soldier is undisturbed and traveling at his ease, he can hunt for trifles along the way, but when the enemy is closing in on the rear, and a command is given to quicken the pace, necessity makes him throw away everything he picks up in moments of peace and leisure. I have no time to investigate disputed inflections of words, or try my cunning upon them. Behold the gathering clans, the fast-shut gates, and weapons whetted ready for war. I need a stout heart to hear without flinching this din of battle, which sounds round about, and all would rightly think of me mad, if when greybeards and women were heaping up rocks for the fortifications, when the armor-clad youths inside the gates were awaiting, or even demanding, the order for a sally, and when spears of the foremen were quivering in our gates, and the very ground was rocking with mines and subterranean passages, I say, would rightly think of me mad if I were to sit idle, putting such petty posers as this, quote, what you have not lost, you have. But you have not lost any horns, therefore you have horns, or other tricks constructed after the model of this piece of sheer silliness. And yet I may well seem in your eyes no less mad if I spend my energies on that sort of thing, for even now I am in a state of siege, and yet in the former case, it would be merely a peril from the outside that threatened me, and a wall that surrounded me from the foe. As it is now, death-dealing perils are in my very presence. I have no time for such nonsense. A mighty undertaking is on my hands. What am I to do? Death is on my tail, and life is fleeting away. Teach me something with which to face these troubles. Bring it to pass that I shall cease trying to escape from death, and that life may cease to escape from me. Give me courage to meet hardships. Make me calm in the face of the unavoidable. Relax the straitened limits of time which is allotted to me. Show me that the good in life does not depend upon life's length, but upon the use we make of it. Also, that it is possible, or rather usual, for a man who has lived long to have lived too little. Say to me when I lie down to sleep, you may not wake up again, and when I have wakened, you may not go to sleep again. Say to me when I go forth from my house, you may not return, and when I return, you may never go forth again. You are mistaken if you think that only on an ocean voyage there is a very slight space between life and death. No, the distance between is just as narrow everywhere. It is not everywhere that death shows himself so near at hand, yet everywhere he is near at hand. Rid me of these shadowy terrors, then you will more easily deliver to me the instruction for which I have prepared myself. At our birth, nature made us teachable, and gave us reason, not perfect, but capable of being perfected. Discuss for me justice, duty, thrift, and that twofold purity, both the purity which abstains from another person and that which takes care of one's own self. If you will only refuse to lead me along bypaths, I should more easily reach the goal at which I am aiming, for as the tragic poet says, the language of truth is simple. We should not therefore make that language intricate, since there is nothing less fitting for a soul of great endeavor than such crafty cleverness. Farewell. So there are a few good points in this reading, probably more than a few, right? But it's really interesting to see Seneca talking about friends choking back emotions to the point of crying when they bid each other farewell. These are two students of Stoicism conversing here. So Seneca seems more willing to talk about and accept the brief expressions of such emotions than maybe someone like Epictetus. At least that's my impression. I want to remind everyone, once again, I haven't done so for a while, that much like Seneca, I am a patient in the bed next to you learning this. I am not like Massimo, a PhD in philosophy. I'm just a lay person learning this along with you. This is just my point of view here. But he's talking about choking back tears and remembering seeing Pompeii, which is kind of cool to hear Seneca talk about, and bidding his friend farewell and so on and so forth. And he talks about how, and I've heard this a lot, like from my grandma who's 97, how when you're older, and I know this from my own experience too, but time seems to speed up the older I get. I will be 40 in a couple years, and well, a year and a half now. Scary. Okay, anyway, so I'm approaching 40. My grandma's 97, and time just slips by rapidly, and he says that when we're looking backwards at it, it all goes into the same abyss and disappears as we're headlong flying forward, just watching time speed up and go past. And it seems to speed up the more we think about how much of life we've wasted. So we have to keep in mind that death is always behind us. So we should stay busy. Don't have too much time wasted. That doesn't mean not to enjoy leisure activities and things, but don't make life all about leisure. Make some of it about learning and practicing and helping others. Let's be just. Let's keep ourselves on our toes. And he goes into several instances talking about how it's a lot of people like to waste time on things that maybe are worth dabbling in, like learning about the intricacies of language and little paradoxes and bits of logic. You know, like I'm not going to read it again, but he says something like, "What you have not lost, you still have." And then he says, "Well, I have not lost horns, so does that mean I still have horns?" You know, that's sort of a logical statement. I don't know what those are called exactly. I'm not a teacher of logic, but it's just a little saying. And he says, "Okay, that's great. What's the point of learning that? Am I a better person? Am I a more moral person? Am I a more just person because I spent my time focusing on these activities? No. Maybe I should learn just enough about them so I am not easily deceived on my way to becoming a more moral person." But even in recent readings that I've read by Epictetus, he says similar things like, yeah, all these little side branches of philosophy are important to learn about, but not to get stuck in like an eddy on a creek. You know, if you're kayaking or canoeing, you might get stuck in an eddy that's hard to paddle out of. You just sort of get stuck there. Well, some of us get stuck in those for our entire lives. We focus on this one branch that we find interesting while ignoring the point of this journey, and that's to become the best human being that we can do. Our job as a practitioner of Stoicism is to take what we were born with and the person who we are before we start this journey, and then try to craft that individual into the best example of a human being that we can. Just like you might take a horse and try to make it the best horse it can be. Well, what makes humans special? That's our ability to be reasonable, to be just to other human beings, etc. So we're trying to work on that. And getting stuck on these, there's little tools that can help us, like I said, logic and things like that. But if we get stuck on those things, then we don't make progress. We need to use them, not make them the point of our studies. So we have to make use of the time allotted to us. Stop fearing death because it is inevitable. That Stoic theme comes up again and again in the reading here. And to remind ourselves, when we leave the house, we may not return again. When we come back to our house, we can say, I may not leave again. When we get up in the morning, I may not make it till bedtime. When we wake up, or when we go to bed, I may not wake up in the morning. This sounds kind of morbid, right? But it's a way to make you remember that death is inevitable and you don't know when it's going to come. And you could follow that path and make yourself, incredibly anxious and nervous, or you could embrace it as inevitable, and you could, instead of becoming anxious, you could take advantage of it and use that as your drive to drive you forward to make the most progress that you can in the time that you have. It's kind of like we're walking towards a cliff in the dark. You know you're going to fall off the cliff, but you don't know if it's 1 step away or 100 steps away. And so be the best person you can until you step off the edge. Carpe diem.
Thank you for listening to The Sunday Stoic. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review The Sunday Stoic on iTunes. Become a member of the Sunday Stoic team, earn rewards, and be an integral part of the show by becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/SundayStoic. Contact the show by emailing sundaystoic@gmail.com or by leaving a voicemail at 501-503-3132. To find out more, visit www.sundaystoicpodcast.com. And as Steve always says, Carpe Diem.